Hello guys, this video is all about the installation process of vRealize Operations Manager 6.7. Before we start with the actual installation, let's take a quick look at the general setup steps, the installation formats, and types that this version of vROps supports. But before doing that, I hope you have analyzed your environment and chosen a size for your deployment to cater your monitoring needs. For more help and information, you can refer to this KB article from VMware. When you perform a fresh installation and configuration of vROps, you'll go through the following general steps. Deploy the OVF to create a master node, run initial setup, log in for the first time in product UI, and configure the new installation. The three steps that I have skipped here will only be applicable depending upon the size of vROps cluster that you have designed for your environment. As you may have noticed, when we previously went through the general installation steps, we only mentioned OVF as the only deployment format. This is because as of vROps 6.7, OVF is the only installation format that is supported. Now let's take a look at the installation types. When the vROps initial setup program begins, as we'll see later in this video, you can select one of the installation options or types. To start with Express installation, this option is the quickest and easiest option. Use this option to set up the first node in vROps cluster. This option uses the default values for all the configuration options. Use this option to set up the first node in vROps cluster. However, unlike Express installation, you can configure advanced configuration options such as password for admin user account, choose between your own certificate or default certificate, name of the node, or name of your NTP server. And this is the third option. Use this to add nodes to the cluster after the first node has already been configured. We will go through the process of deploying a fresh vROps instance and perform some initial configurations to make it ready for use. I'm going to deploy a master node, a data node, and a remote collector for my vROps Manager cluster in this video. Deploying the vROps 6.7 virtual appliance is very similar to any standard OVF or OVA deployment on vSphere. I have pre-downloaded the OVF from myvmware.com and now I'm using vSphere web client here. Just for you people to know, I jumped here by browsing onto the vCenter FKTM. If you have deployed any OVF or OVA package before, this process is no different. Select Deploy OVA template on the cluster. Select the vROps 6.7 OVA template. Click Next. Specify the name of the virtual machine and the folder it will reside in. I will rename this virtual machine. Generally, a naming convention is followed in all the organizations or projects, so you should follow one. And I have selected the data center and click Next. I should choose the management cluster here as this machine should be part of managing machines cluster, and so this is the right thing to do. Click Next. Doing this will give me the details of the template. You can see the disk size it will occupy depending on the disk format that you will select, and the OS that this virtual machine or virtual appliance runs on. We should click Next. Let's accept this license. next. This is where you can select the size of the deployment. VMware gives us 5 sizes to select for vROps deployment. Also, remote collectors are available in 2 sizes. And like I mentioned earlier, you should first analyze your environment, find answers to the questions like how big is my environment that I need to monitor, and how big it can grow, and then design your vROps cluster. In this deployment, we'll be doing small, which is 4 vCPU and 16 gigs of RAM. Uh, Extra small and small nodes are primarily intended for test and POC concepts. This is the data store where the virtual machines will be placed in what disk format, thin or thick provision. For our critical and management machines, it is recommended that we select thick provision eager 0 option. I'll go with thin provisioning here because this is just a test deployment and I don't want to have a resource crunch in my lab environment. I'll select the data store here and it is already selected. Now choose the networks. Just select which port group the virtual machine network card will be assigned to. Now I'll give this VM all these networking details. This is the gateway. I'll need a domain name. And the subnet. And what do we have here? Oh, I don't want to use IPv6 IPs. And the time zones. You can select any of these time zones. I would go with the default one. Now, once all the correct information is entered, you can click Finish. Congratulations, you've just now deployed your first node. Now I'll deploy another virtual machine that will act as my data node for the master node that I've just now deployed. I'll rename this to vROps node 02. The cluster. And I'm done with deploying my second node. Now I'll deploy another node that will act as remote collector for my vROps cluster. The process is all same, whether it is remote collector, data node, or the master node. It should go into the management cluster as well, but obviously you'll be using a different vCenter. Now since I'm doing this for my lab environment, a test purpose, so I'm deploying it in the same vCenter. I will use the standard size of remote collector. It uses 2 vCPUs and 4 gigs of memory. Now this should also go with thin provisioning. As you see, all the settings are same. So now that my remote collector is in process of getting deployed, I'll go ahead and power on the virtual machines that I have deployed earlier. Now once this node gets deployed, I'll power on this virtual machine as well. Yeah, it's up. Now let's check the node console just to be sure that the machine is totally up and running. Now this screen is a proof that we're ready to configure the vROps that we have just now deployed. I'll browse the IP address of the master node. The next step is straightforward as it contains 3 installation type options: express, new, and expand an existing installation. We discussed the difference between the installation types previously in this video. Since this is the first node in our vROps cluster, I'll choose the new installation method. The first visit page is Getting Started page. This will show me a workflow diagram of the process of setting up vROps. I'll click Next. Now we can set the administrative password. You should enter a password that fits with the minimum requirements listed on the page. Now the third step is to choose a certificate. You can either choose to use a self-signed certificate or one issued by the Trusted Certificate Authority. A valid vROps certificate signed by a trusted private or public CA is vital during installations, especially if this vROps instance will go into production. You have to configure a vROps certificate signed by a CA before you configure Endpoint Operations Management Agent. If self-signed certificates are used, the first node becomes the CA for the vROps cluster and will issue certificates to any future nodes. Since this is a test deployment, I'll use the default certificate and click Next. Deployment setting is the fourth section. In this section, enter the master node name and enter an NTP server. Even though the first node of vROps cluster is always the master node, initially there's no guarantee it will remain so. This would be the case if a vROps cluster was deployed and HA was enabled. Then at a later time, the first node was to fail. As the master is a role that can move between two servers, master and master replica, it is recommended to use a name that is relatively generic. The NTP server will only be added if the vROps server is able to connect to the service. The master node will become an NTP server itself for other data nodes in the cluster. Now this is the new feature that we've got from this version of vROps. We can add already deployed data nodes to the vROps cluster here. Another thing that we can do here is to enable HA. Yes, we can even make any of the data nodes that I add here a master replica. Now I'll add the virtual machine that I deployed second in the order, which was supposed to serve as my data node, and save. Once you've done all the configurations, click Next to move on. The next step is the last step, but here we don't do actually anything. We just list the next steps involved in the configuration of the new vROps installation and click Finish. When the Finish button is clicked, the web page will be redirected to the admin interface of vROps. To get to this interface manually, you can even enter the IP or fkdm/admin. If you're completely unsure of the eventual end state of the environment regarding how many objects vROps will be collecting metrics from, it is recommended to start off with a smaller number of nodes. This is because, like many things in life, it is easier to add than to take away. All the nodes that are part of your vROps cluster will be listed down here. Now this process of taking the cluster online can take from 10 to 30 minutes, and that generally depends upon the size of your environment, specifically your vROps environment that you have deployed. And the cluster is finally online. At this point, we have installed the master and a data node in our vROps cluster. Next, we will add one additional remote collector node to expand the existing cluster. We've already deployed the node using the same OVA previously in this video, and now we just need to join this node with our cluster. It is recommended that all nodes be added before the cluster is originally started. In this instance though, we'll be adding a node to an existing running instance, as this is also supported and works well. The process is pretty same. Browse the IP or FQDN of this node. Now at this Getting Started screen, choose the Expand an Existing Installation option this time. We will use this option every time we're going to add new nodes, be it remote collectors or data nodes, to scale out vROps Manager. When this option is selected, we'll be presented with the Expanding Existing Installation wizard pop-up. In the Node Settings and Cluster Info section, give the new node a name and select the node type. Here we have only two options, Data and Remote Collector. Select Remote Collector from the Node Type menu. Enter the IP or FKDN of the first node of the cluster, that was master node, and click Validate. To validate the node information, click to accept this certificate and next to proceed. The username and password section is where we enter the password of the admin account of the first node deployed, or we can use the shared passphrase if one was generated. Here. And why do we have to do this? See, there might be a case when someone else, like a non-admin user, might be deploying and configuring this node for you, and you will not want to share your admin password. This is where your passphrase works. A passphrase is just like a temporary password that you can set by using the admin UI. In this instance, we'll just use the password of the admin account and click Next. On the Ready to Complete section, click Finish. Now once the setup finishes, we'll be redirected to the same admin UI. Now here we can see the original vROps analytics node and the newly added RC node, all in not running state, with status as offline. As you can see, the Finish Adding New Nodes button is grayed out, and it will remain grayed out until the addition of the node completes. Now we should wait for this operation to complete, and this can take some time. Now that the operation is complete, we can click this button. A confirmation dialog will appear. Click OK to confirm the addition of the nodes to the cluster. Now once the addition of the nodes to the cluster has completed, you'll see all the nodes showing with running state and online status. Now this can also take some time. Now that the cluster is finally online, you can see all the nodes with state and status as running and online respectively. I'll log into the vROps with username and admin password that I've entered during the first part of configuration phase. Once successfully logged in, we're presented with a new window. Click Next and you'll be presented with the normal end-user license agreement. Click Accept and Next to move on to the licensing section. Enter the vRealize operation 6.7 license key. If you're licensed for vCloud Suite or vRealize Suite, that license is what would be used here. Another option is to use the trial and enter a permanent license later. I'll make no changes here to continue using the trial version. On the VMware's Customer Experience Improvement Program page, we select if we want to join the CEIP program. Joining this is something you may consider doing if you're deploying a production instance of vRealize operations. Click Next to move on. On the last wizard page, click Finish to complete the configuration. Once the configuration has finished, the web page is redirected to the Solutions section on the Administration tab within the vROps UI. Here we configure the vCenter servers that vROps is to monitor. Select the VMware vSphere and click on the Configure icon as here. You can choose to configure other management packs that are available by default in this section of vROps, or you can later come and add other management packs that you need. At this point of time, we have deployed a master node, a data node, and a remote collector node. Just as our infrastructure environment keeps on growing, we can always choose to scale up or scale out our vROps manager according to the requirement. Thank you guys for watching this video. Stay connected for more sessions on vROps.